There's something happening inside the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that leadership doesn't want to talk about. Thousands of members, many of them lifelong believers, temple recommend holders, returned missionaries, are walking away. And they're not coming back. This isn't about people who got offended at church. It's not about someone who just wanted to drink coffee or skip Sunday meetings. The people leaving today are some of the most devoted members the church has ever had. They studied. They served. They believed with everything they had. And then they found something that changed everything. What you're about to hear are the 5 reasons driving this exodus. These aren't opinions. These aren't anti-Mormon talking points invented by critics. These are the actual issues that members themselves identify as the moment they could no longer stay. And the church's own essay series, published quietly on their website, confirms much of what you're about to hear. If you're a believing member, this might be uncomfortable. If you've already left, you'll probably recognize your own story in at least one of these. Either way, by the end of this video, you'll understand why the church is losing people at a rate it has never experienced before. Let's begin with the one that starts it all for most people. 1. The Joseph Smith crisis. Almost every person who leaves the LDS Church traces it back to one moment. The moment they discovered something about Joseph Smith that the church never told them. For most members, Joseph Smith is presented as a humble farm boy who knelt in a grove of trees, saw God the Father and Jesus Christ, and was called to restore the true church. It's a clean, simple, powerful story. Children hear it in primary. Missionaries teach it on doorsteps around the world. It's the foundation of everything. But here's what happens when a member decides to dig deeper. They discover that Joseph Smith told multiple versions of the first vision, and those versions don't agree with each other. In one early account, he described seeing only one being, not 2. In another, the purpose of the visit was forgiveness of sins, not a call to restore a church. The version the church uses today, the one every member knows by heart, wasn't actually written until 12 years after it supposedly happened. And the earlier versions, the ones closer to the actual event, tell a very different story. Then there's the translation of the Book of Mormon. Members grow up seeing paintings of Joseph Smith sitting at a table, carefully studying golden plates with a scholarly expression. But the historical record tells a different story. Multiple eyewitnesses, including people who supported Joseph Smith, described him placing a small stone inside a hat, burying his face in the hat, and dictating the text. The golden plates weren't even in the room for much of the process. The church eventually acknowledged this in their Gospel Topics essays, but for generations of members who were taught the other version, the discovery feels like a betrayal. And then there's the polygamy. Not the general concept, which most members know about in vague terms, but the specifics. Joseph Smith married at least 34 women. Some were already married to other living men. Some were as young as 14. Many of these marriages were conducted in secret, even hidden from his first wife, Emma. When members encounter these documented facts for the first time, the response is almost always the same. If the church wasn't honest about the founder, what else weren't they honest about? That single question is the crack that breaks everything open. 2. Polygamy and the moral crisis. The polygamy problem goes deeper than Joseph Smith. When members start researching the founder, they inevitably discover that polygamy wasn't just a minor chapter in church history. It was central to the theology for decades. Brigham Young taught that it was essential for the highest degree of salvation. Church leaders practiced it openly, defended it publicly, and insisted that it was a commandment from God that would never be revoked. The church officially ended the practice in 1890 under intense pressure from the United States government. Utah could not become a state while polygamy continued. But even after the official declaration, some church leaders continued performing plural marriages in secret well into the early 1900s. The end of polygamy was not a spiritual revelation received in prayer. It was a political negotiation. For modern members, this creates a devastating problem. They were taught that prophets speak for God. They were taught that the church is led by ongoing revelation. But what they find is a pattern of leaders declaring something to be God's eternal will, and then quietly abandoning it when the social or political cost becomes too high. If polygamy was truly a divine commandment, why was it abandoned under government pressure? If it wasn't truly divine, then what does that say about the men who taught it as eternal truth? Many members describe this discovery as the moment they realized they'd been given a carefully edited version of their own religion's history. They weren't told about the youngest wives. They weren't told about the women who were already married. They weren't told about the secret ceremonies. They feel, in their own words, deceived. And that feeling doesn't go away, because it wasn't a misunderstanding. The information was available. The church chose not to share it. 3. The racism no one wants to talk about. If the polygamy problem shakes a member's trust, the race problem often shatters it completely. From the days of Brigham Young until 1978, black men of African descent were denied the priesthood in the LDS Church. Black men and women were excluded from temple ordinances, which in LDS theology means they were excluded from the highest level of salvation. This wasn't a bureaucratic oversight. It was taught as doctrine. Brigham Young stated publicly that black people bore the curse of Cain and were less valiant in the pre-mortal existence. These weren't casual remarks. They were taught from the pulpit and recorded in official church publications. Successive presidents of the church upheld the ban. For over a century, the LDS Church told its members that God Himself had decreed that black people could not hold the priesthood. Then, in 1978, the ban was lifted. Church leaders announced a revelation, known today as Official Declaration 2. The priesthood was now available to all worthy men regardless of race. Members celebrated. The church moved forward. But here's what the church has never done. It has never officially apologized. It has never formally repudiated the specific teachings of Brigham Young and other leaders who called black people cursed. The Gospel Topics essay on the subject acknowledges that the ban existed and even distances the modern church from the racial theories that supported it. But it stops short of saying those prophets were wrong. It stops short of calling it what most of the world would call it, which is institutional racism justified by theology. For many members, especially younger members who have grown up in a more diverse and connected world, this is simply unacceptable. They cannot reconcile the idea of a loving God with a church that excluded an entire race for over 100 years and has never fully accounted for it. And when they raise these concerns, they're often told to have faith, to trust in God's timing, to focus on the present. But for many people, that answer isn't enough anymore. 4. Doctrines that don't match the Bible. The theological questions come next, and for members who have a deep relationship with the Bible, these can be the most destabilizing of all. The LDS Church teaches a number of doctrines that are dramatically different from mainstream Christianity. And when members start comparing what they've been taught with what the Bible actually says, the contradictions become impossible to ignore. The most significant is the nature of God. The LDS Church teaches that God the Father was once a man who lived on another world and progressed to become God. This teaching comes from Joseph Smith's famous King Follett discourse, delivered near the end of his life. Lorenzo Snow, a later president of the church, captured it in a couplet that every member knows. As man now is, God once was. As God now is, man may become. This means, in LDS theology, that human beings can progress to become gods themselves, ruling over their own worlds and spirit children. This is not a metaphor. It is a literal teaching that was affirmed by church leaders for generations. But for members who read the Bible closely, this creates an enormous problem. The God of Isaiah says there is no God beside him, there was no God formed before him, and there will be none after him. The God of the Bible is eternal, uncreated, and unique. The idea that God was once a man, that he progressed, that he is one of potentially many gods, is fundamentally incompatible with the Bible's description of who God is. Members who begin studying these differences often describe a deep spiritual crisis. They feel torn between two versions of God, the one they learned in church and the one they're reading about in Scripture. And when they bring these questions to their bishops or stake presidents, the answers rarely satisfy. They're told to pray about it. They're told to trust the living prophets. They're told that additional revelation supersedes the Bible. But for someone who has come to believe that the Bible is the Word of God, being told that a modern prophet overrides it doesn't bring peace. It deepens the crisis. 5. The trap. Social control and the fear of leaving. This is the reason many people stay long after they've stopped believing. And it's the reason leaving the LDS Church is so much harder than leaving most other religious organizations. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is not just a Sunday experience. It is a complete social ecosystem. Members attend church together, serve together, raise their children together, and build their entire social networks within the ward structure. In heavily LDS communities, particularly in Utah, Idaho, and parts of Arizona, virtually every meaningful relationship a person has may exist within the church. When someone begins to doubt, they quickly realize that leaving isn't just a spiritual decision, it's a social one. Their spouse may still believe. Their parents may still believe. Their children's friends, their neighbors, their co-workers, all of them may be active members. Expressing doubt publicly can lead to being released from callings, which is humiliating in a community where your calling defines your standing. It can lead to being treated differently, talked about, or quietly excluded. Many people describe a period of years where they attended church every Sunday, participated in temple worship, and performed all the expected duties while internally they no longer believed any of it. They describe it as living a double life, smiling in the foyer while grieving inside. They stayed because the cost of leaving felt too high, losing your family, losing your friends, losing your entire identity. And when people do finally leave, the church doesn't always make it easy. Officially resigning membership requires a formal process. Family members are often encouraged to continue inviting the person back. Missionaries may be sent. There is an unspoken but very real stigma attached to those who leave. In LDS culture, leaving is not seen as a personal choice. It's seen as a moral failure. People say you were offended, you wanted to sin, you weren't faithful enough. The idea that someone could leave because they studied the evidence and reached a different conclusion is rarely acknowledged. This is what people mean when they say they feel trapped. They love the people, they value the community, but they can no longer believe the claims. And the system is built in a way that makes leaving feel like an act of destruction rather than an act of conscience. These 5 reasons are not separate problems, they are connected. A member discovers the true history of Joseph Smith, which leads them to the polygamy records, which leads them to the racial ban, which leads them to the theological contradictions, and suddenly they realize that the system they built their entire life around doesn't hold up under examination. And then they look around and realize that leaving means losing everything they know. This is why the exodus is so painful and why it is so permanent. People who leave after this kind of journey don't come back because they didn't leave on a whim. They left after years of study, prayer, and agonizing reflection. They left because they concluded that intellectual honesty required it. The church can build new temples. It can launch new media campaigns. It can redesign its website and rebrand its image. But until it addresses these 5 issues directly, honestly, and without deflection, the doors will keep opening from the inside, and the people walking through them will not be looking back. If anything in this video resonated with your own experience, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me which of these 5 reasons was the one that changed everything for you. Was it one moment, or was it a slow process? Your story matters, and there are thousands of people watching this right now who need to hear that they're not alone. Subscribe if you want more content like this, because we are just getting started.